Welcome to All Pro Football Data. My name is Jim Coburn, and today's episode we're talking about wide receiver metric battle. So we're going to be looking at a showdown between Marvin Harrison Jr. and the commonly compared wide receiver prospect, former Arizona Cardinals and Pittsburgh, which is the college he went to, wide receiver, Larry Fitzgerald, based on data. So this is a metric comparison. We're looking at what they look like on paper to see if they have similarities, if they are the next, if Marvin Harrison Jr. really is the next Larry Fitzgerald. These are questions that we're going to look at today as we compare their data and their metrics. So to first start off, let's start with offensive market share data. This is by far the biggest component in terms of production traits for wide receiver position. And when you look at Marvin Harrison Jr., he had an 80 percentile receiving market share score, a 90 percentile total offensive market share score, and a 90 percentile touchdown market share score. This is compared to 3,710 wide receivers since the 1969 NFL draft class. That's pretty impressive. He pretty much hits the All-Pro and Pro Bowl thresholds that you're looking at the position. But when you look at Larry Fitzgerald's data, this is where things get interesting, because Larry Fitzgerald was 97 percentile in terms of his receiving market share, 99 percentile in terms of total offensive market share data, and 99 percentile in terms of touchdown market share at the position. There just isn't much of a comparison here. Larry Fitzgerald is one of one in many ways, and Marvin Harrison Jr. is definitely a productive wide receiver, but he doesn't really compare much in terms of his overall production or market share production compared to him. Moving on to efficiency scores. So based on efficiency scores such as touchdowns per touch, yards per reception, Marvin Harrison Jr. did well in this area as well. He had an 80 percentile yards per reception score and a 90 percentile touchdown per touch score. But Larry Fitzgerald, though, had a 90 percentile yards per reception score, and he also had a 90 plus percentile touchdown per touch score. So he was a much more efficient wide receiver. So he's much more productive in terms of market share, and he was much more productive in terms of his efficiency scores. But then we need to look at another aspect, which is athleticism testing. Now, I know a lot of you guys are going to go, well, hold on, wait a minute now, Jim. He hasn't been to the combine, which is true. One thing that prompted me to do this video was that Marvin Harrison Jr. Declined to participate in the scouting combine this year. And in terms of his pro day, and based on what was stated, he probably isn't going to test at his pro day. He's just going to prepare for his rookie season, which is fine. But we have to kind of see how to test him, right? And based on his data, so if you go to NFLDraftScout.com, you look at Marvin Harrison Jr.'s data, this is his expected 40-yard dash on the high end. So his lowest number that they expected him to run was about a 4.36. If you have him run that 4.36, he would have had a 90 percentile speed score for his size, based on 6'3", 205 pounds. If he did not run a 4.36, if he was more closer to like a 4.46, he would have had a 70 percentile speed score. But let's just assume that Marvin Harrison Jr. really is this generational talent that can run 4.3 at 6'3", 205 pounds. I mean, after all, Marvin Harrison Sr. did run in the 4.3s as well. I think actually he was lower than that. He probably was in like the 4.2s. But again, that was before the scouting combines were, videotaped all the time and coverage and, everything else like that. So let's just give it to Marvin Harrison Jr. Let's just say he ran 4.36 at 6'3", 205 pounds, which would give him a 90 percentile speed score. If you're going to be a top 5 wide receiver taken, you should run that fast, okay? For a wide receiver. 4.46 is not bad, again, 70 percentile, but you would expect somebody whose father is Marvin Harrison to run that fast, okay? Now, assuming all that is true, Larry Fitzgerald did go to the combine, did test, and he had an 87 percentile explosion score, 93 percentile speed score, and an 80 percentile flexibility score. And oh, by the way, Larry Fitzgerald was basically about a 6'3", 220 plus pound, almost 230 pound wide receiver. The comparison breaks down right there. It's like comparing a a middleweight to a heavyweight. They're just completely different types of prospects based on their size. And I know it's a different era of football, don't get me wrong. Wide receivers are getting smaller now with all these spready offenses. They're lining them out wide, they're playing in space, they're running more plays than they ever had before in terms of passing the football. Air raid, spread offenses have done this. But there's a difference between the athletes that were coming out in the 2000s compared to the athletes coming out now. I think that definitely should be talked about. But in terms of an actual athleticism comparison, if Marvin Harrison Jr. did in fact run 4.36, he actually would compare pretty similar to Larry Fitzgerald. It's just that Marvin Harrison Jr. would be the spread offense version of Larry Fitzgerald. If Larry Fitzgerald played in today's game, he might have only been 6'3", 205 pounds. I mean, who knows? But that definitely is a possibility, considering the trends that have been happening at the position. Moving on to adjusted production scores. Adjusted production, again, is a context for the production. Things like age, MSA rating, and of course the pass rating. Based on these scores, Marvin Harrison Jr. had a 91 percentile age score, a 96 percentile MSA rating, and a 99 percentile pass score or pass rating, which again takes into account all of his production traits, plus his level of competition, plus his team strength scores. Larry Fitzgerald, on the other hand, had a 99 percentile age score, a 92 percentile MSA rating, and a 99 percentile pass rating. The only thing that really compares these two prospects is the fact that they had similar pass ratings. So when you take all their production and add it all together for their level of competition and everything else like that, they pretty much were neck and neck in terms of their pass rating. Age-wise, though, Marvin Harrison Jr. is not quite as young as Larry Fitzgerald was coming out. Again, it's the difference between a wide receiver who's basically almost pretty much 20 years old almost versus a wide receiver who's closer to, say, 22. Again, Marvin Harrison Jr. is still a young prospect, don't get me wrong, but Larry Fitzgerald was a much younger prospect coming out and was much more productive overall compared to what Marvin Harrison Jr. did, relatively speaking, based on market share data. Because again, market share data is like a relative percentage of a team's offense type of score. Moving on to what some of the real pro comparisons are based on offensive market share, age, MSA, and pass score ratings. I would say the more apt comparison for not Larry Fitzgerald, but for Marvin Harrison Jr. would be Chris Collinsworth. Chris Collinsworth had a very similar receiving market share score in the 84 percentile, very similar total offensive market share score in the 90 percentile, just like Marvin Harrison Jr. was in the 92 percentile, well, if you round up. And then the touchdown market share score was in the 95.77 percentile for Chris Collinsworth and 95.86 for Marvin Harrison Jr. And of course, Collinsworth was an older prospect, but if he had played in today's game, he might have declared earlier, considering the trends that happened back then. But I would say, in terms of an actual pro comparison for Marvin Harrison Jr., it might be closer to Chris Collinsworth. And this doesn't take anything away. I know a lot of you guys look at Chris Collinsworth and go, that's that old guy that we see on television all the time announcing the games. No offense, older gentleman, okay. But he was a pretty dang good wide receiver in the NFL, guys. Again, in the 80s in particular. So don't discount what I'm saying here. Chris Collinsworth balled out, okay? Marvin Harrison Jr. is likely going to ball out as well. I just think the comparison from him to Larry Fitzgerald, based on the context of everything, is a little iffy, okay, in terms of actually comparing the two. So this is what the final outlook is for me. Marvin Harrison Jr. is a fantastic prospect with wide receiver traits, based on his wide receiver traits at the position. But he should not be compared to other wide receiver prospects who had much better production and size. Again, it's like comparing, this is the best example I have, it's like if a heavyweight boxer faced off against a middleweight boxer. You'd say that match is unfair as it is with a comparison. But a more appropriate comparison could be that Marvin Harrison Jr. is the middleweight version of Larry Fitzgerald, or he's the second coming of Chris Collinsworth. Again, put some respect on Chris Collinsworth's name because he was a pretty dang good wide receiver in the 80s, guys. But I would say that that is the final verdict on this particular matter. I think it's going to be even harder to really make the comparison shake if he's not going to participate at the combine. Because again, Marvin Harrison Jr. said he's not going to participate at the combine. He's probably not going to do anything at his pro day. He's probably just going to take team meetings, and that's about it. So we're really not going to know how athletic he really is. We might get measurement data, of course, how long his arms are and his hand size, but that's just not going to be enough to really make a hardcore comparison between the two. Because again, his 40-yard dash was an estimated 40-yard dash based on NFL Draft Scout, and it was on the lower end. So it was, he probably isn't going to run 4.36. I mean, he should. If you're going to take a wide receiver in the top five, you should run that fast. But assuming he doesn't run that fast, he still is a good prospect. Again, I'm not trying to hate on him or anything else like that. Marvin Harrison Jr. should still be considered one of the best wide receiver prospects in this particular draft class. But there's a big difference between him and Larry Fitzgerald. You can't make that comparison. That comparison just isn't appropriate. You can't do it. You can't do it. It's like comparing Mike Tyson, to a middleweight, and you can't do it. A middleweight, competitor. You just, I don't know how else to say it. You just can't make that comparison from a data perspective. Again, if you want to talk about ball and impact and style and all that kind of stuff, go to a film guide. Okay, but if you're talking about the pure hard numbers, the fossilized record of a prospect, Marvin Harrison Jr. does not really compare to Larry Fitzgerald based on his data, based on his overall production data, and then all those other things included. So, with all that stuff out of the way, thank you guys so much for watching today's show. My name is Jim Coburn, also known as Gymmetrics. I will see you guys in the next episode. Be sure to check out my X, formerly known as Twitter account on Gymmetrics. Also check out my Patreon page, patreon.com/jcoburn. Like, comment, and subscribe if you like this video. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.